Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are diving deep into a huge story unfolding right now at the Iowa State House. We're talking about two new bills that are at the center of a really passionate debate. And honestly, they could completely change how civil rights and parental authority work in the state. So let's just get right into it.
So, what's this all really about? Well, when you boil it all down, it comes back to these three words: pronouns, parents, and power. Who gets to decide which pronouns are used at school? What are the actual legal rights of parents? And maybe most importantly, who has the final say in setting all these rules? These are the big questions that are really fueling this whole thing.
Okay, so before we start wading through the legal language of the bills themselves, I think it's absolutely crucial to understand the real world situations in schools that got us here in the first place. This isn't some abstract legal theory. These are daily conflicts playing out in hallways and classrooms all across Iowa.
And that friction, it almost always sparks in one of these four areas. First up, you've got pronoun and chosen name use. This is probably the most common one. Then there's social transition support, and that can be anything from dress codes to what school clubs are available. Third, a big one, access to facilities like bathrooms and locker rooms. And finally, you get to the real heart of the tension. Where does a parent's authority end and a school's policy begin? These are the exact issues the legislature is trying to tackle.
Right, so with all that conflict swirling around, the Iowa legislature steps in with two very specific bills, House Study Bill 664 and House Study Bill 669. Now, even though they were debated on the same day, they're actually aimed at totally different parts of the problem. Let's break them down. Let's make this super simple. The easiest way to think about HSB 664 is as the uniformity bill. Its whole purpose is to create one single set of civil rights rules for the entire state, no exceptions. HSB 669, on the other hand, is the parental rights bill. Its focus is totally different. It's all about legally protecting parents and the decisions they make for their kids. So yeah, two bills, two very different goals.
Okay, so we know what the bills want to do. Now it's time to get into the nitty-gritty. How would these things actually function if they become law? Let's unpack the mechanics.
So the legal engine that makes HSB 664 run is this idea called state preemption. It sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. State law trumps local law, period. Right now, you've got cities like Ames or Iowa City that have their own local rules protecting gender identity. Well, if this bill passes, those local protections would basically become void because they're considered broader or different than the state law. And this quote from Representative Schuyler Wheeler really gets to the heart of the argument from the bill's supporters. He frames it as a question of pure practicality. The worry is that having this patchwork of different rules from city to city creates a ton of confusion and makes it almost impossible for businesses or schools to operate consistently. Okay, now let's switch gears to HSB 669. Think of this one as creating a kind of legal safe harbor for parents. And it does that in three very specific ways. First, it would legally state that a parent refusing to affirm their child's gender identity is not child abuse. Second, it makes sure that refusal can't be used against a parent in a messy custody battle. And third, it says families can't be turned down for fostering or adopting just because of these beliefs. So you might be asking yourself, okay, but why now? Why is all of this blowing up right now? And that's a great question. The answer actually goes back to a major legal change that happened just last year, which pretty much set the stage for this whole debate. You really have to look at this timeline to get the full picture. See, way back in 2007, gender identity was added as a protected class to Iowa's main Civil Rights Act. But then, in 2025, that protection was stripped out at the state level. So what happened? Some cities decided to create their own local protections to fill that gap. And that brings us to 2026, where these new bills are a direct response to that whole sequence of events. All right, so let's put ourselves in the room. Let's talk about the debate itself. Because when these bills hit the floor at the State House, the testimony was raw, it was emotional, and it represented some really deeply held beliefs on both sides of the issue. Yeah, the scene at the State House on February 9th was, well, pretty intense. We're talking subcommittee rooms packed to the rafters, protesters filling the hallways, and you could sometimes hear chants like love, not hate, from outside the room. It was just a very clear sign of how much this means to Iowans. So on one side, for the folks who support HSB 664, it is all about consistency. Representative Stephen Holt put it pretty bluntly, arguing that this patchwork of city rules just creates a mess for businesses and schools trying to figure out what they're supposed to do. From this point of view, the goal is clarity.
But on the other side of that coin, you have opponents like Katie Freeman, a city council member from Coralville. And for them, this is not about confusion at all. It's about a core principle, the right of a local community to govern itself and create protections that fit the unique needs of the people who live there. Okay, so now let's look at that other bill, the parental rights one. Supporters, like Representative John Dunwell, they really see HSB 669 as a necessary shield. The argument is that parents who believe gender is based on biology shouldn't have to live in fear of being accused of child abuse or losing their kids in a custody case just because of those beliefs. And then the counter-argument, which was voiced really powerfully by an educator named Jordan Humphreys, brings the focus right back to the child's well-being. From this perspective, the key is affirmation and love. That's what allows transgender kids to thrive. The concern is that any law seen as non-affirming could cause real harm. All right, so we've heard the legal mechanics, we've heard the passionate arguments from both sides. Let's pull back and look at the big picture. What's the bottom line? What would this all actually mean for people living in Iowa if these bills pass? This table really breaks it all down. Let's walk through it. Take pronouns. Before, refusing to use them could be considered harassment or abuse. After these bills, that same refusal would be legally defined as protected parental guidance, not abuse. It's a huge shift. Or look at facilities. Before, you could sue under local law to force access. Now, those local laws would be gone, so there's no local legal basis to do that. With social transitioning, schools often affirmed students just avoid getting sued. Now, parents would have a legally spelled out right to refuse consent. And finally, for parents who feared the state getting involved, these bills would grant them specific immunity from those kinds of claims. So, when you put it all together, what you're really seeing is a fundamental shift in Iowa's entire legal approach here. It's a very clear move away from a system of local protections and potential legal pressure to affirm, and a move toward a system of statewide uniformity where a parent's non-affirmation is a legally protected right. And that brings us right back to the one huge question at the center of all of this. And there is absolutely no easy answer. When it comes to something this personal, this important, where should the ultimate power lie? Should it be with the state government, with local communities, or should it be with individual families? That is the question that Iowans are wrestling with right now.